This has been a monumental effort, completed under enormous pressure of every kind, including unwarranted and baseless attacks on the Royal Commissioner himself. Now, let me say this about the Royal Commission report. The Royal Commission's report has uncovered many weaknesses in the trade union movement. But if its recommendations are substantially adopted, if the lessons of this report are learned, the trade union movement will emerge much stronger. Trade unions have never represented such a small percentage of Australian workers as they do today. This report, if it is heeded, if its recommendations are implemented, and we will describe how we will seek to do that, how we will do that. If that is done, then the trade union movement will be stronger. The members that it represents will have greater confidence in their officials, and other workers will have greater confidence to join it. So right at the outset, let me say this. This report uncovers practices which have been long known to exist. It is a real watershed movement, a real watershed moment for the Labor movement, for its leaders, for Mr Shorten. They can take this opportunity to support these recommendations and undertake real and lasting reform of the trade union movement. The beneficiaries of that reform will be their members and other Australian workers that may in the future seek to join the union movement. And right across the board, all Australians will benefit from a more confident, capable, competent, honest administration of unions right across every sector in Australia. This is an opportunity for Mr Shorten. This is an opportunity, a test of his leadership, and he should seize it and rise to the occasion and recognise that it's the interests of his members that is at stake here, the interests of ordinary working men and women of Australia who have been so let down by so many officials of the union movement. Now let me turn to the report itself. The report finds, as we know, many examples of misconduct, of illegality, of corruption, of wrongdoing. Some of it is thuggery, some of it is theft. There have been some very improper practices, which I'll turn to in a moment. But an important point to bear in mind as we consider the attacks on the Royal Commission that will come from the Labor Party today, is that, as the Royal Commissioner observes, almost all of the underlying facts have been established by admissions to the Commission, incontrovertible documents, decisions of courts and tribunals, or well-corroborated testimony. These are not volumes of opinion. These are volumes of findings based on fact. Now let me deal with one particular example of the Australian Workers' Union, the example of a company, Cleanavent, who employed cleaners. And I quote from the Royal Commission report, it's paragraph 63. In exchange for $25,000 per year, the Victorian branch of the AWU, in substance, agreed for 3 years not to seek better terms and conditions for its members employed by Cleanavent. It would not have been difficult to obtain better terms and conditions, but the Victorian branch of the AWU preferred to take the fairly paltry sum of money for itself. For the workers employed by Cleanavent, the outcome was appalling. The members of the Cleanavent management team, this is the employer, involved in the deal, describe it as saving the company amounts ranging from $1 million to $2 million. All involved benefited from the deal except the people the union was supposed to be representing. That's in the Royal Commission report. It's a fact. Yet this practice has been defended by Labor and by the union. Now, in the light of this, surely, who would argue with recommendation 48 that requires that a union receiving such a benefit to disclose it to its members before they vote on an enterprise agreement. How could that be unreasonable? How you would think that would be common sense, and yet we've had to have a Royal Commission to find a recommendation of this kind. As the Commissioner Hayden found, unions had become concerned not with their role as the instrument through which to protect the interest of its members, but with self-interest. And that is what the Royal Commission report seeks to bring to an end, to ensure that unions act in the interests of their members, not in the interests of officials or the interest of unions, the union itself. Now, I note, and I hasten to add, that most union officials across Australia, and there are thousands of them, are diligently seeking to represent their members and doing so honestly and capably. We recognise that. But nonetheless, this is not a case of a few rotten apples spoiling the whole barrel. There are many union officials and widespread cultures of impropriety and malpractice as set out in the report. Now, the government's commitment to reform is absolutely unwavering. The Registered Organisations Bill, many of whose provisions are mirrored by recommendations in this report, has been twice rejected by the Senate. Senator Cash will shortly describe how a new registered organisation bill will now be prepared, which includes the recommendations of the Hayden Royal Commission, because the Royal Commission sets out the reasons why the government's own registered organisation bill does not in fact go far enough. At the same time, the Australian Building Construction Commission bill, the ABCC bill, which has been rejected once by the Senate, will be reintroduced in the first sittings next year. We are utterly committed to this exercise in law reform. It will not weaken the union movement, it will strengthen it. And it requires real leadership, not just on the part of the government, not just on the part of the Parliament, but on the part of the Labor movement itself. Now, the Labor Party has claimed that the Royal Commission is a witch hunt. They claim that they've acted to strengthen union governance while in government, and that they've been proactive in suggesting new policy. Well, the facts speak for themselves. These events, these appalling examples of misconduct, many of which have been the subject of referrals to other authorities, are not ancient history. This is current. This is what's happening now. This is what's happening during the administration of leading figures in the Labor movement. The Deputy Leader of the Labor Party, Tanya Plibersek, said we all know that this Royal Commission was designed to achieve a political outcome. Well, let me say to the Labor Party, the only political outcome of the adoption of this report would be a stronger union movement, a union movement which more workers were likely to join, a union movement which the members of that union movement would have more confidence in, that would believe in, that would know that their funds were being properly administered, that there were not secret deals being done with employers, with payments being made to the union behind their back. So this is a real test for Mr Shorten, Ms Plibersek and all the leaders of the Labor movement, both the industrial wing and the political wing, the Labor Party. This is their time, their chance to renovate, to reform the union movement in a way that would strengthen it and perhaps arrest the decline that it's seen over many years. Now, often the industrial struggle is seen as a battle between workers and bosses. Well, here the conflict revealed is plainly between the workers, the members on the one hand, and bosses, yes, but the bosses of the unions. The bosses of the unions who variously lived high off the hog from the contributions of some of the lowest paid workers, as we've seen most spectacularly, most horrendously in the case of the HSU, and then in other cases sold those members out by taking undisclosed payments back to the union from the employers in return for trading off the workers' conditions. So We commend this report. It's a very, very important one. We thank the Commissioner.